Okay, so the whole point of this Deus Ex Machina channel is along the theme of turning a hopeless situation into a happy ending. And so, in what ways is the planet hopeless? Well, uh, it's dystopian, it's evil. Um, so, I'm going to touch on many things. Um, Many things need reform, um, and so I'll first touch on education. And so the current structure of education is actually kind of like a scam. And so if you think of the value that a university is bringing to a student, if that student is paying for it in full, with loans or with their own money, what are they getting? They're getting um, professors and teaching assistants who are versed in the material they want to learn to help them to acquire skills and and ultimately, however, the majority of educational systems suffer from the following issues. Um, the problem sets are repetitive chores that are pretty much drudge work. And so you're doing the same type of problem over and over again for different conditions, repetitive, not really making you smarter, just kind of chore, drudge work that's a waste of your time and energy and doesn't really, is unnecessary for understanding the concept, right? And then the textbooks for most of the courses you would take at a university are actually available as free PDFs online. And then as well, the lectures are done in a time constrained fashion. In many cases, a professor, to meet the time constraints of the lecture, has to go through the content somewhat quickly, in which a student would really grasp the content when they read the textbook in their own time, or or along with doing a few problems in that area in their own time. And so ultimately, this is why you can have a YouTube channel like BPS Space, where I think this fellow's formal degree was in music, but he's doing all the complicated electronics and avionics and software to build rockets, right? Because information is free, right? And so, especially now, education is pretty much just a scam. And the suckers that are paying for college out of pocket or paying for it with loans are getting an extremely raw deal. And then, the clever people are on full rides on scholarships, or the clever people are not in school, just doing their own course of study or self-directed projects. And so SpaceX, on their website, the first thing they ask for, or the most important thing they ask for, isn't your degree. It's actually, what have you done that shows evidence of exceptional engineering? This could actually be just a self-directed project done outside of the context of a formal educational program, right? Have you shown evidence of exceptional engineering? And so the clever people at SpaceX who don't actually have formal degrees, right? Um, anyway, and so to reduce the cost of education, you'd have sort of the following modifications: reduction in, the amount of repetitive problems that a problem set consists of. Um, Removal of lectures in which the professor is just quickly going through content that the student has to read in the textbook to understand anyway, and they're whizzing through this slideshow and I can't learn the information as quickly as the professor is going through all this detailed technical information, right? So the lectures would only be to elucidate things that the student cannot read in the textbook, and the student would be expected to read the textbook in their own time, right? And then instead of the professors and the university getting really rich, you could reduce the profit margin and stop treating the students like, disposable rats in your machine. So, anyway, so that's a few thoughts on education. But now we'll talk about um, about about um, well, climate. And so I'm originally from Jamaica. And so recently there was Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. And of course there's social media information that's saying that, an extremely small percentage of the emissions that cause, hotter oceans, which informs the emergence of hurricanes, right? An extremely small percentage of that, those emissions were from Jamaica itself. Most of the emissions that contribute to those hotter oceans, which contribute to the formation of hurricanes, are from the major emitting countries like the US and China, right? And then Jamaica is in a vulnerable location on the planet, right? Suffers for the sins of the others, right? And so a nation which has contributed the least suffers the most. And this is the sort of ironic propagation that the universe sort of loves to do in its non-benevolence. But anyway, and so, this whole concept of God as well. So religion needs reform. I've evolved to converge to an actual correct theology, which I'm going to call non-benevolent deism. And so our Creator set up the following rules. The machine that is the universe conserves energy, conserves angular momentum, and then also conserves charge. And so, in terms of energy, the sun, that's a fusion reactor, is fusing 4 hydrogens into two deuteriums, into a single helium, and then that mass defect, because the helium is less massive than the hydrogen, will release energy in the form of heat and light. That heat and light reaches the surface of the earth. The trees that are on the earth have chlorophyll in the leaves. When the sun's energy in light form hits those chlorophyll-infused leaves, it undergoes photosynthesis, which is CO2 plus H2O plus water plus sunlight plus chlorophyll, leads to the creation of oxygen and also starch. And so the oxygen, the photosynthesis enhances CO2 sequestration and produces oxygen, and the starch, fills out the bark of a tree, and then also when a tree it has reached maturity and is a fruit producing tree, that starch then is siphoned off to the fruits which contain fructose and sucrose, which is ultimately energy stored in the form of chemical potential energy. Where does the chemical potential energy in the form of fructose and sucrose in the fruits of the tree come from? It fundamentally the light energy from the sun that is impinging the chlorophyll infused leaves, right? And so the whole thing is conserving energy. The entire thing. If you're listening to this right now and you lift your forearm, your bicep is doing work on your forearm, and that bicep has energy because the body is inhaling oxygen, drinking water, and eating foods, namely that contain proteins and carbohydrates that give the body energy. And so the Creator God said the universe must conserve energy. The Creator God said the universe must conserve angular momentum. And so the reason the Earth is spinning towards the east, right, the whole planet, is also the reason a figure skater will spin faster when she constrains her mass towards the center of her body. Angular momentum conservation. Conservation of charge, you can derive certain equations that are relevant to applications in circuits with capacitors from the law of conservation of charge. And so the Creator God designed the simulation, you could call it, with these conservation laws that are unbreakable and held at various scales of the universe. And so if any atheist wants to say that those laws exist, that doesn't imply God, that in my opinion is an extremely silly argument. Because if those conservation laws exist, directly in my mind, that is a direct implication of intelligent design and some kind of God that established those laws. Now, where it gets sketchy is that intelligence may not necessarily be benevolent, which is the point of non-benevolent deism. And so the intelligence that is established all of this is also running the following, which is an algorithm. The algorithm could be called natural selection, and it's sort of a carbon-based human life form, right? Over our evolution from ape descendant things to bipedal humans in our current form, right? We went through a whole lot of biological evolution. And so the algorithm is the following. There is a mutation. If that mutation is fitting for the environment, then that mutation will be selected for evolutionarily, and then that life form with that mutation will reproduce such that the mutation is present in the offspring. And so a basic example is that as you get nearer to the equator, there are more black folk. But there are two types of black folk. There are African black folk and there are Indian black folk. And so Africans and Indians both have melanin, which was a mutation that was ideal because Africa and India are proximate to the equator, in which they get a certain amount of solar radiation, such that melanin helps prevent their skin from developing skin cancer, right? And so there you have it. And so that mutation of melanin was strong, was good, right? In terms of the survival, right? And so there you go. And so, however, natural selection, evolution, variance, it is not necessarily benevolent. And so an emergent human who emerges with a high IQ is not blessed with a genius IQ. Genetics and evolution lead to normal distributions. And normal distributions are present in every aspect of an emergent human. And so, basically, right, a human's intelligence quotient, right, pretty much deterministic. The maximum height a human will reach, given the genetics, pretty much deterministic. Many other things, right? And so the variance that exists, a high IQ guy isn't blessed, a low IQ guy isn't cursed. A girl with large breasts and backside isn't blessed. A flat girl isn't cursed. An endowed guy isn't blessed in terms of dick size, and then a micropenis guy isn't cursed. The non-benevolent evolution, which has continued through to the present time, simply has allowed genetic combinations that are such that variance is present, right? And so this is non-benevolent deism. And so on the topic of prayer, right, an atheist doesn't pray to anything really, right? And so the whole idea is that anyone who studied enough physics and the scientific method and so on will pretty much evolve out of praying to anything. And so praying is just chatter in the skull in your own conscience with sort of your own notion of what God means in relation to your own vision of, local prosperity. And so my mother, for example, when we got home safely, she would thank God that we got home safely. That the car, and so on, and we got home safely, right? Is any actual God, governing over a vehicular car trip, right, to ensure that the human agent gets home safely? No. And so, frankly, we actually went in the wrong direction initially. We made a bunch of gasoline passenger cars functioning on fossil fuels, which then put carbon that was in fossilized form into the atmosphere, which then messed up the planetary balance and caused the greenhouse effect, which is causing problems. And so there's no actual God that you should thank for getting home safely in a gasoline passenger car. And so these whole notions of God being good are purely related to local delusions of benevolence based on your own idea of what it is to be safe or prosperous or in general happy. And so this gets very deep into what I'm going to call the benevolence delusion, which is coupled with confirmation bias. And so if a person prays for something and then the thing they prayed for comes true, possibly because of that person taking outward action to manifest what was prayed for, then that person has a confirmation bias that some benevolent force must have heard their prayer. And that is how prayer evolved. Prayer evolved as a confirmation bias. But you're not actually talking to anything. That could be called God. Anyway. And so I touched on education, then I touched on religion, and so on. So now, so then, what have I been doing about all that? So I've leased a 2024 Tesla Model 3 for over a year, and of course it has no tailpipe emissions, and the autopilot is safer than human. And the Tesla factories are designed to be pretty much net zero with like solar on the roof, right? And so Tesla as an entity is one of the cleanest companies on the planet, and so that's great, right? And then I've been using, a long time ago, this thing was called Aspiration, but they changed its name to GreenFi, and so they plant trees. The cost is a few American cents, like 3 American cents or less, to plant a tree in Kenya or Haiti. And so I've been using Aspiration, which is now GreenFi, since middle of 2021, and so my tree count in terms of Kenya, trees planted in Kenya and Haiti is nearing 800, right? And so if you think about what's happened, there are now mangroves that didn't exist before. There are birds flocking to those mangroves. There are Kenyans and Haitians who are employed as tree planters whose livelihoods are enhanced given that job. And that number of trees upon maturation will sequester enough CO2 to offset the emissions of like 80 or 80 gasoline passenger cars, while my Tesla, of course, has no tailpipe emissions, right? And so Tesla's no tailpipe emissions tree count takes away 80 or 80 cars from the roads, right? Anyway, um, anyway, um, anyway, um, so yeah. Anyway, um, yeah. The other thing, which I suppose I'm trying to understand, is that I sense something about the universe that is special, which I'm going to call it. I'm going to call some type of irony. And so, if you assess the stories of multiple humans, there'll always be this propagation of irony, where it's like, oh, that was the most ironic thing that could have happened, and it happened. And so, the saying "fate loves irony" is grounded in truth because it, for whatever reason, the simulation or how this is structured, in terms of locally examining human lives, it is simply continuously, one of the most ironic thing that happens, right? That you could imagine. And so you can't necessarily predict what that will be beforehand. Only after the fact you're like, whoa, this was like the most ironic thing that could have happened. And so a lot of people will agree with that. And I'm not sure why this is the case. But anyway. Anyway. So. Anyway. So other things that I'd like to see change. So on the dystopian aspects of the world, so you go to a bar, right, or a strip club. What's at this place? You'll find a few gambling machines. And so, what is at the gambling machines? So sorry. So the gambling machines are evil. In what way are the gambling machines evil? All the intricate electrical engineering and all the intricate software engineering is going into making a machine that ultimately allows you to win, but mathematically is guaranteed to give out less money than it takes in from the gamblers, right? So it's going to give out less money than it takes in from the gamblers, right? Even though it is possible to win. And the algorithm guarantees that over time it is profiting off the gamblers. And of course you have these ads saying, you have a problem with gambling, call XXX number, blah, blah, blah. And so it's evil, right? And so you don't find many software engineers who understand how the gambling machine works, playing the gambling machine. It's, not that intelligent people, who are playing and then they lose money to it. Some people who are clever may have figured out a loophole in the algorithm and then found a way to make money off the gambling machine. But that's a rare case. Mostly it's just, in summary, the gambling machine profiting off people, even though it's possible to win, right? Then now at the bar, what are they selling? They're selling alcohol. And so there are a whole lot of people who are proud to be sober, right? Because alcohol is this addicting substance, right? And so the bar gets rich off selling alcohol, but then a whole lot of proud sober people may not be buying, alcohol from the bar, right? But I've been to a few bars, right? And they saw me as a fellow who repeatedly would go to the bar, but would never buy any alcohol. And so they talked to me and said, we've seen you here, but you many times, but you never buy anything from the bar. And then they banned me. Might have made me 86, right? Which is that basically, hey, you are not playing into our profit game, buying this addicting, damaging substance called alcohol. So we don't want to see you at the bar, right? And so that's why the whole world's evil, right? And so there are a whole lot of sober guys. Let's say there's a sober guy who simply goes to a bar to talk to other people, meet new people, and play pool, right? But doesn't buy alcohol. Is that person therefore justifiably needing to be banned from the bar? Are you that evil? Well, maybe you are, right? Anyway, so anyway, um, anyway, and so now we're gonna go to um, um, some other stuff. So yeah, yeah, uh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so anyway, um, so no more gambling machines, and no more you have to buy alcohol to be in this space. Um, you know, if you're just like trying to learn about the social scene of like this place, and you're like, where you're gonna find people maybe at bars. It's like if you're not a drinker, it's like okay, you know. Anyway, so uh, anyway, um, yeah. Anyway, now we're gonna go to what are we gonna go to? We're gonna go to what else is dystopian? Um, uh, uh, yeah, well, so and all the things that are dystopian, um, because of the nature of consciousness, it's by design a bunch of people who don't like each other and want each other to be wrong. And so, because of evolution and variance being not fair, you you have this thing where ultimately all people do is tell each other they're wrong. Um, and so the reason that I'm confident is that I've, with the scientific method, determined things that are true for me, and I don't care if that makes someone else upset, because the world just isn't fair, right? And so, you know, uh, uh, um, if I said it, I was 6'4", good looking and multi talented in athletics and music and technical things, uh, you know, that would be true. Um, Based on the different things I've done on this channel, you can see me doing many different things, right? Um, but anyway, I suppose the other thing I would touch on that is uh, dystopian. So I'll touch on everything. Is the pornographic industry, um, and so I'll touch on this as well. So why is it dystopian? Because everyone is lying, and it's all just lying, and so if you went on blackto.com and looked at a recent thumbnail that 6'5" Jason Love did, looked at the thumbnail for a scene that 6'5" Jason Love did, with a full body standing picture of Jason Love, you see, because he's so tall, his dick doesn't look that large on his body, right? And so Jason Love, might have previously, self-claimed that he was 10 inches, right? But then you ask Grok, which can scour the whole internet, especially Reddit conversations in which people are doing, image analysis and size estimation of different male pornographic actors, right? The solid consensus in terms of internet estimation of the bone-pressed erect length of the 6'5" black male porn star Jason Love is 7.5 inches, right? But then he might have said he was 10 inches, right? Anton Harden, who is 5'7", right? The solid Reddit consensus, given image analysis, is that he's 8.25 or maybe 8.5 bone pressed erect length, right? And he's 5'7", right? But then that gets exaggerated to maybe like 11 or something, right? Fred Dingo, Mandingo, who's also 5'7", might be nearing like a 9 BPEL, right? And then there's a video on a pornographic website saying woman impaled by 14-inch black cock, right? And so Mandingo at 5'7" with a 9-inch bone pressed erect length gets exaggerated to 14 inches, right? Similarly, Julio Gomez, we have to talk about Julio Gomez, right? He would say he was 14 inches, but the solid Reddit image analysis consensus of his unenhanced BPEL is something like 9.25, right? Or some value between 9 and 9.5 bone pressed erect length that he then exaggerates to 14, right? And so you have a problem, which is that because of these exaggerations, the whole thing's gone nuts. And those exaggerations are linked with small female hands on a dick, which make the dick look bigger, camera angles, and also the actors pump before scenes. They utilize vacuum pumps. And so the vacuum pump enhances their length and thickness and makes their dick engorged with more blood, right? Some of them, they use, surgical modifications like SLR, which decouples the dick from the pelvic bone and adds 1 to 2 inches in length with that decoupling. And so the British white porn star Danny D did SLR. And then further, there is injectables and injections, along with surgical modifications. And so an actor going by the name of Brickzilla, early in his career, he was, okay size, but then he had this noticeable increase in size. And that is because along with surgical modifications and injectables, he increased his thickness and hence became Brickzilla. And so the thickness of Brickzilla is not natural, it is enhanced, it is fake, with a combination of surgical things and injectables, right? Anyway, the current explanation for the thickness of Julio Gomez is that Julio suffered from sickle cell anemia, which came along with priapism. And priapism causes blood leakage, fibrosis, and scarring, which basically leads to a permanently swollen appearance. And so ironically, that priapism connected with sickle cell anemia, which can also lead to sometimes painful erections, was also somewhat responsible for his sort of abnormal thickness, right? Now, however, this is, sort of medical speculation, because in the truth is that Julio, as a male porn star, could have, just like Brickzilla, done intentional either surgical or injection techniques to enhance his thickness. And so I think it's really a combination of intentional sort of enhancement techniques like pumping, injections, or surgical modifications, and also maybe priapism and sort of blood leakage and fibrosis and scarring because of sickle cell anemia. I don't think that it's purely this priapism thing. I think there is intentional size enhancement, just like Brickzilla did intentional size enhancement. So anyway, so anyway, I'm not, some person who would be, going through with some size enhancement thing, but that's because I'm lucky. We talked about my belief in non-benevolent deism, and so I emerged as this 6'4" brown man, and so I have African genetics and I have white genetics, right? And so, without any, enhancement techniques like vacuum pumps or anything else, my maximum bone pressed erect length is actually approximately 9 inches, right? And then interestingly, my girth at the head of my dick, the circumference, gets up to maybe at least 7.5 inches circumference, which is moderately thick. And so my dimensions are approximate 9-inch BPEL and then 7.5-inch girth circumference at the head of my dick. And so 9 by 7.5 is actually bigger than many existing male porn stars, right? And so, anyway, the second time I ever had sex in my whole life was with a much older woman So I was 24, she was 35. She was 5'10" and 160 pounds and had a large backside and pretty, right? And so I brought that woman to orgasm 4 times in a single session. And that's what she told me afterwards. And so it's very abnormal for a woman to reach orgasm 4 times in a single session of sex. And so my size kind of contributes to that. Why am I coupled to having that size? Exactly what I'm talking about with non-benevolent deism, which is that natural selection, evolution, and genetics leads to that variance. And I am on the lucky end of the Gaussian of dick size, or bone press direct length size, right? But in all honesty, right, my flaccid or unaroused state is usually like maybe 5.5 inches from pelvic bone to head, right? And then homeostasis, which is if it's cold, my blood goes to my internals and I experience shrinkage. In a cold shower, flaccid, given homeostasis, I could literally shrink to like 4 inches. And so the hilarious thing is that I can experience the extremes of being flaccid during a cold shower and experiencing shrinkage due to homeostasis and be 4 inches, and then be hydrated with good cardio when it is not cold and aroused, and at least like a 9 BPEL, right? And so, some female consciousness who think that Julio Gomez is 14 or 15 inches, or that, Damian Daysky is 12 inches, right? In actuality, Damian Daysky is in like the 8 to 8.5 range, and Julio is in like the 9 to 9.5 range. And so basically I'm maybe like 1/2 an inch smaller than Julio. And so if I told a woman that I was 9, she'd be like, well, 9, oh, that's small. But no, in the US, the Gaussian of BPELs has a mean ranging from like 5.1 to 5.6 inches erect. And so 9 inches BPEL is actually above the 99.99th percentile, which is such that if you sample, 1,000 American men randomly, the statistical probability is that they'd all be smaller than 9 inches, right? And so 9 is actually incredibly rare, right? But with all the exaggerations of the pornographic industry, a girl may think that 9 is small, which is funny. So anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so anyway, so like it's all just kind of lying. And the other thing is that they utilize women that are petite. And so a recent scene on Blacks.com is pairing Anton Hardin with Kylie Rocket. And so Anton is 5'7" and like 8.25 or 8.5 BPL. And then Kylie Rocket is 5'3" and not that heavy set, right? And so she is a petite woman, right? For comparison, my most recent sexual partner Kylie Rocket is a little 5'3" thing, but then my most recent sexual partner was a 5'10", 160-pound, huge backside woman. And so my most recent sexual partner would make Kylie Rocket look tiny, right? And so my size is like maybe half an inch bigger than Anton, right? But when I'm with a woman as large as my most recent sexual partner, I may not look that big, even though I am big. Then you put me with Kylie Rocket, I do look big, right? And so lots of these females are like 5'2", 5'3", and the petiteness of the female enhances the perception of size. Anyway, so anyway, so anyway, yeah. So I also touched on this, and in terms of like, if you said you want to like change everything because it's this dystopian, then 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 and you also can like it can explain or change religion, then how does your religion explain certain things? And the answer is, so let's explain the stereotype of African men being on average more endowed, right? And so the average BPL in the US of A is between 5.1 and 5.6 inches erect. The average BPL in India is like 5.12 inches erect. Or like, let's just say the average in India is 5.1 inches erect. The average in Sudan, Africa is 7.1 inches erect, right? And so although Indian guys and African guys still have that melanin, right? Why are the Sudan guys on average more endowed than the Indians? And the answer is that the trait which is the answer is that melanin itself is not the causative thing in terms of dick size. It actually is the temperature of the air of where the humans evolved. And so Sudan, Africa is generally on average hotter than India. And so when you're evolving in a hot place and your nutrition is good and your blood flow is good and your body is doing the form of homeostasis, where because it is hot, it is always putting the blood to the externals, to the surface of the skin, so that the heat stored in the blood can be lost to the environment quickly, right? And so this means that people evolving in temperate regions during the winters experience dick shrinkage, right? Because of reverse homeostasis, cold homeostasis. But if you're in an equatorial region that is always hot, with no winters pretty much, you are experiencing the homeostasis, which is the surface of your skin and the extremities are always sort of engorged with blood, so to speak. And so you evolve in a hotter region, the average dick size will be greater than in temperate regions. So it's not the melanin, it's just the temperature, right? And so if you're not understanding how that makes sense, basically in an equatorial region with no winters, there's no shrinkage during the winters caused by homeostasis. And so when an emergent human is evolving in those hot regions, going through puberty, and like many generations of that pass, over time, the penis is just getting more blood than in colder regions, right? And so it grows bigger. It all just kind of makes sense. So, anyway. Anyway, so um, anyway, so yeah. Anyway, what else? What else can I do? Um, Other things. Um, Other things. So, anyway, um, so, um, what else? What else can I? What else? What else? What else can I do? Um, huh. What else? What else? Okay. Yeah, I think I've touched on religion, education, explaining natural phenomena, certain profit systems, alcohol, bars, gambling machines. Um, oh yes, of course, sports, sports. Yeah, and then I touched on pornography, the lies of pornography, what that does to consciousness. Um, so then finally now let's do sports. And so the number one sport um, in 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 the world in terms of viewer appreciation is 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 soccer in the U.S., but internationally football, right? Um, and so why is that the case? Uh, you know, some Americans would say, "Oh my gosh, the soccer players are girls. They are like they're light, right? And and some of them like dive and roll around and carry on, right?" Um, but in complete honesty, the set of things that can happen in a game of soccer or internationally football is greater than the set of things that can happen in pretty much any other sport. You'll see like Zlatan Ibrahimovic doing a bicycle kick, uh, you know, doing sort of martial arts inspired kicks, uh, you know, scoring long shots and volleys, right? You'll see Messi dribbling past three players. You'll see Cristiano scoring, incredibly brilliant long shots and half volleys, and he also had a bicycle kick against in the Real Madrid versus Juventus game in the Champions League some time ago, right? And so the elegance as well of Barcelona tiki taka, passing, moving in triangles, team understanding, that elegance is unique, and the sort of understanding of the team and the strategy and all of that soccer or internationally football is the world's greatest and most appreciated sport, right? Um, but you get into the following problem, which is you get to you get the income inequality. And so most professional soccer or internationally football players, they don't go to college. And so you have you could examine take an example, Marcus Rashford. So Marcus Rashford didn't go to college, right? And then he was playing for Manchester United, and then to my knowledge he was recently put out on loan to FC Barcelona, right? And so and so um, 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 and so basically, if you assess what is Marcus Rashford's salary, the internet would say maybe 12 million, right? And so, he doesn't have a college degree. But interestingly, with his influence and money via soccer or internationally football, he used that to impact in some way childhood poverty. And so I believe the University of Manchester gave Marcus Rashford an honorary doctorate for using his influence and money from soccer to impact childhood poverty, right? And so there you go. There's Rashford, didn't even go to undergraduate college, makes 12 million a year as a professional soccer player, and as an honorary doctorate from University of Manchester for using his influence to impact childhood poverty, right? And so why is all that possible? Because of attention. And so because the set of things that can happen in soccer is more than any other sport, and the level of elegance and intelligence to it is more than any other sport, it gets the most attention of any sport on the planet. And so if you're one of the best players in a top league, you'll be paid on the order of millions, right? And so Cristiano Ronaldo, at maybe 200 million a year, even though he's like 40, playing in the Middle East, right, makes Rashford at 12 million look like nothing, right? And then Mbappe at Real Madrid is in excess of 30 million, right? And so these are the salaries. Desiree Doué at 19 at PSG was making like 6 million a year, right? And so the whole thing as to, the cool athlete guys versus the nerds. Some nerd guy who goes to college to get a 4-year degree in something technical and then breaks 6 figures with that degree is making, peanuts compared to an athlete cool guy who didn't go to college and is just getting attention as one of the best players, in some sport. And so quite frankly, it is dystopian that these athletes get to ride over all of us like kings with the amount of money they make. Then all the nerds are just making peanuts compared to the athletes. Um, and so if you ask an athlete to, you know, solve some electrical engineering or software engineering or civil engineering or aerospace engineering, problem, right? They'd be like, I didn't go to college for any technical degree, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. I'm Cristiano Ronaldo. I fly around in private jet. Can I do aerospace engineering for private jet? No, but I am the best player in the world until January when they assign the Ballon d'Or to someone else. Anyway, so 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 anyway, so anyway, so 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 um anyway, uh so yeah. And so you ask like these athletes, right, making millions, like, can you do this 200K software engineer job requiring detailed understanding of algorithms and data structures and AI algorithms and generative AI techniques, and have you built a large language model and trained it and deployed the product? And they'd be like, yeah, no. And so an athlete who's the best in the world at soccer, or one of the best in the world at soccer, can make millions of dollars, but they're not smart enough to make only $200,000 in a relatively senior technical position. And that's the dystopian thing, right? Is that they get so much attention from all this consciousness, largely like average intelligence consciousness that spends time and money on watching sports, right? But what civilization actually needs is builders and engineers who can make the stuff that the civilization runs on, right? And so we don't need, more showmen. We need more builders. We need more engineers. But the whole lifestyle of being this millionaire athlete who gets to be a king, right? And then they're not as smart as the nerd guys who are contributing to civilization, the actual practical stuff that needs to be contributed, other than just entertainment, which is what the athletes are providing. Entertainment is important, right, for any civilization to function, but it's really quite a sad situation. Uh, and so anyway, the whole thing is that the planet has the power, and so if anyone is unhappy with the income inequality of all these athletes riding over the other normal people like kings with the amount of attention they get, the answer is the following: you have the power. The masses simply could elect to not give the athletes their attention. Thereby, their attention would not be monetizable with ad revenue, and the athletes would not be millionaires. Everything is the way it is because we're all allowing it to be the way it is. So, 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 so. Anyway, um, so, so, um, anyway, so, yeah, um, anyway, so, I did this nerd undergrad degree involving mathematics, computer science, and physics. Um, but as you can see, as per the clip that's in the short section, at about 4,000 views, Deus Ex Machina, the football god, although I'm a 6'4" guy, I do have some level of agility and sort of talent in in soccer or internationally football. And so that clip is just a completely unedited clip of me doing a few tricks. Um, and so for whatever reason, that clip ended up being perfect. Um, it was just a single take, and a completely real clip. So anyway, um, so um, also for any Americans saying that soccer players are girls because they're light and some of them dive and carry on and like fake injuries to get waste time or whatever for whatever other reason, or secure a foul. Not all players dive and do that BS, right? Um, and so, for example, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's like 6'5", and for like most of his career was like approximately 200 pounds or something, wouldn't really dive or carry on like a girl. He'd do bicycle kicks, he'd do acrobatic kicks, he'd dribble past players even though he's tall, and score chip goals and long shots. He had the sort of finesse of a shorter player with his dribbling ability and chipping ability, but then he had the power of his height to score long shots and acrobatic kicks and volleys and bicycle kicks, and so he was really quite something. He's one of my favorite players. Anyway, um, so um, anyway, so um, so so anyway, um, so anyway, so now anyone who has like a bad opinion of soccer in the U.S. is gonna, you know, uh, you know, eat their words because because the U.S. is hosting the World Cup. So it's the world's most popular sport, and America has now come to realize that. So I'm happy about that. So anyway, uh, so so anyway, um, um, anyway, um, yeah, yeah, um, anyway, um, yeah, um, yeah. So, so, um, yeah, um, yeah. Is there anything else? So, I made a video uh, covering my comparison with helium-3 as the spice melange of the universe in terms of applications for fuel for Helion's fusion reactor and then also as a cooling agent for quantum computing. So, so that's so that's um, that's you know looking promising for the future. That would be epic if that works out. And then there's a bunch of other technical content on the channel, but the first video was a video I made a long time ago in undergraduate college called "How to Make Utopia," where I discussed everything I envisaged for the utopian civilization, some of which has become manifest. And so I mentioned autonomous vehicles, and now, time evolving to the present time, I've had an autonomous Tesla for over a year. And then I mentioned Helion, and now Helion is building the world's first fusion power plant in the state of Washington, with a sort of agreement to provide clean fusion electricity to Microsoft data centers by 2028. So this is all good. Anyway, yeah. So um, so um, um, yeah. I think I might have covered most grounds of, like, you know dystopian things that I'd like to see change about the planet and the way things are. Um, and 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 yeah, yeah, um, and yeah. So lest I devolve into um, saying less than ideal things. Let's end it there. Deus ex machina.